By the way, what do you think of the retirement bonuses? Since that's going to be discussed now.
Now it's going to be discussed. I look forward to having that discussion. I was actually surprised by that myself. And I am actually not all that satisfied by the response to the administrative inquiry, which basically says, this is how it is. What I really want to know is this really having a huge impact? I mean, to be fair, the one interesting thing in the administrative inquiry is it says, look, the average tenure of the people who get this thing is 27 years, and our goal is to have long-standing people. But if the average tenure is 27 years, this is not working as a retirement, as a, what's the word I'm looking for? A retention incentive. So I'm actually not so upset we're going to talk about it. I'll have some pointed questions.
Could there be some council direction on what administration should do about that? Is that appropriate?
Yeah, absolutely, that's appropriate. That's something we do. It's probably not appropriate to do it today. We probably need to hear from human resources people in a little more detail and, frankly, a little bit closed session because we need to understand some HR implications of this and union implications of it. But it's absolutely appropriate. Council sets bargaining mandates and labor mandates all the time.
There doesn't seem to be enough information there to figure out if people are staying until 27 years on average to collect it, or they would stay until 27 years on average and they get it anyways.
That's exactly the question I have.
Okay. Do you think there needs to be some kind of sunset clause on this? I mean, can you wrap it up overnight? Or?
I'm very willing to have a good conversation about it.
Next topic.
So what do you think about the court decision today with the Toronto City Council situation?
Oh my goodness. Will it surprise you to know I have opinions on this matter?
Well, did you know that Doug Ford is saying he may vote against the notwithstanding?
Not may.
He did.
Yeah.
He's going to.
Yeah.
He said he will. At the very beginning of all of this, I suggested, as the court suggested today, that it's not an issue of whether the province has the power to make this change. They do. It's not an issue of whether or not Toronto City Council is too big or too small. There was a multi-year consultation process on this. Council eventually decided not to shrink. But that is a totally legitimate conversation to have. And even when the council is shrunk to 25, they'll represent somewhat more people than Calgary City Councils represent. So these are all legitimate debates. The challenge was the timing. So now we have a situation where people had quit their jobs, had raised money, had rented office space, had printed flyers, and then in the middle of the campaign, a provincial government that had never mentioned their intent to do this, the day before nomination day, totally gets rid of the jobs. And the judge today said that's not fair, it violates people's freedom of expression, and it violates the rights of the voters. I'm not a judge, but that seems pretty legitimate to me. I will say, though, that as someone who has been studying Canadian constitutional law for many, many, many years, the notwithstanding clause has only been used 3 times, other than politically by the province of Quebec for a period of 5 years, from 1982 to 1987, where they used it on every piece of legislation. It's only substantively been used 3 times, and each of those were very specific cases. In Saskatchewan, for example, there was a back-to-work ruling with the labor union that was about that specific case. It is very reckless to start playing the Constitution's nuclear option in this way. There are many other options available to Premier Ford. In fact, if I were him, I'd have lots of advice on how to get what he wants without messing with democracy. There are ways to do it. You just have to have a little bit of patience. But to use the notwithstanding clause to achieve political goals in this way is super dangerous. Because remember, that can be used on any one of the fundamental rights in Section 2 or Section 7 through 15 of the Charter. That's very technical. In other words, your freedom of expression, your freedom of religion, your freedom of assembly, the notwithstanding clause can be used by any government against those things. And to use it in something that is not so fundamental to the functioning of a society, that strikes me as very, very reckless.
So this is missing that?
That's what the judge said. The judge was pretty clear. Used very straight language saying, look, this is actually, as I said before, subverting democracy by doing this in the middle of an election. Could you have canceled the election, extended the term of the city council by a year, and then had a new election under new ward boundaries? I bet you that would have been bulletproof in the courts.
We're having our own conversation about representation this morning on the council floor as well. You said that you weren't surprised, or what was it, told you so, when the subject of revisiting our ward boundaries came up again. Can you explain what you meant
Well, those of you who were around when we had that debate may recall that I pointed out that we had a huge discrepancy specifically between Ward 3 and Ward 12. And Ward 3 in particular is very small. It will grow, so it will grow as we build up the Keystone area. But it was very, very small. And you'll recall I suggested that we take one neighborhood from Ward 4. I was agnostic as to which neighborhood, and add it to Ward 3. And I was accused of being hugely political because one of the councillors lived in that neighborhood, which I didn't even suggest what neighborhood it should be. And it was funny because isn't the one being political the one who says, wait, I live there, therefore I should be able to have it in my own ward? It was a funny discussion. But it is interesting if you were to look around and just look at the volume of work that the councillors do. So in some wards there's an enormous amount of redevelopment, for example. And as you can see, these redevelopment proposals take a long period of time. In Ward 11, you can ask Councillor Farkas the actual number. But I believe that in Ward 11 he's got well over 20 community associations that he deals with. And in Ward 3 there are 2. So it's clear that council made a small error in setting up those boundaries. The question is it something that needs to be fixed before the next election, or will growth look after the differential? If you really want to get deep into it, because we approved, and probably will approve today, 2 new major developments in southeast Calgary in Ward 12, it probably means that the growth in Ward 3 will make up for the differential.
With the road, is it time to look at a new map that includes maybe one more councillor?
I don't think so. Council very clearly rejected that option in its last term. We looked at adding 1 or 2 new councillors, and we said instead we will increase the councillor's office budget so that they can manage this. And my sense is that is council's desire. I think going from 14 to 16, say you wouldn't add 1, you'd add 2 because of you needing a 1 number, so you don't have ties in council. But if you were to add 2 from 14 to 16, I think that's still manageable. But getting back to our earlier conversation, there does come a point where the city council is just too big, and I think you are seeing that in Toronto.
Is a review?
No, we always do.
Okay, so every...
Yeah, this is standard.
So,
I'm sure you've heard a lot of the feedback on this 30
Yes.
What's your reaction to the feedback?
I think we'll have a good debate on it today, and if council chooses to go to 40 kilometers, that's fine. My argument is, if you're going to do it, just do it. The science is super clear that people don't die at 30 kilometers. They die at 50 kilometers, and some of them die at 40 kilometers. So there's been a lot of unhelpful discussion on this over, oh, pedestrians are texting too much, or drivers are inattentive, or parents don't know how to raise their kids. All of that is completely irrelevant. The point is, for this very small part of your commute, the part where you're in a cul-de-sac or a close within your own neighborhood, should you go slower? And I think everybody agrees that that is the right thing to do. If we're going to do it, I was the only one on council who voted against extending playground zones because I thought that was confusing. But if we're going to do it, you may as well do it where the science says you should do it. If council goes to 40, that's fine. It's a step in the right direction. But I figure I'm a fan of ripping off the Band-Aid. And if council really thinks people are speeding in residential neighborhoods, then this is probably going to 30 is the right thing to do.
How many roads would this actually affect? Maybe not an exact number, but what kinds of roads would it affect?
The number of roads is very high, but the roads themselves are very small. So the way Councillor Carrad describes it is if there's a line painted on the road, it would not be affected by this. So for example, I live on a boulevard in my neighborhood, and it would actually be a bit of a debate, should the boulevard stay at 50 or not, the road I live on. But certainly all the roads that branch off of the boulevard would be impacted by this. But really, this is not about, I'll tell you my own commute, okay? I go on Coral Springs Boulevard, which may or may not be impacted by this. Then I turn onto 68th Street, which would absolutely not be impacted by this. And so the vast majority of people's commutes would not be impacted, and probably routes where there are buses, like my boulevard, would not be impacted as well.
So we're going to hear a lot about the Olympics tomorrow, obviously.
Nah, I don't think so. It's going to be a 2-minute debate.
I believe in late July or early August, you said you have a hard time living with some of the timelines we were looking at if Calgarians didn't have enough time to digest information about money. So are we looking at timelines that you can hold to right now?
Yeah, that's why council has this little off-ramp. It's not a little off-ramp, it's a big off-ramp. That's why council has this off-ramp tomorrow, because I would suggest that if council feels they don't have the information required to make a decision tomorrow, then we're starting to get very close to the plebiscite date on November 13th. The province has committed to having all of the facts out from on their contribution by 30 days before the plebiscite. I can't imagine the federal government will not do something similar. 30 days is enough. I would prefer 60, but we're getting close to that 60 now.
Are you confident the province is going to cough up the money?
I'm confident that the province will give us something. Sorry, that has two meanings. Let me try that again. I'm confident that the province will come to a final decision well in advance of the plebiscite, and I have no reason to believe that will not involve significant funding of the project.
Two questions. Is it sufficient?
Precisely. And frankly, that's a question that we have to look. Remember, there's four parties here: the city, which doesn't have much money, the province, the federal government, and the IOC. And so as we put these jigsaw pieces together to determine what the budget is and what would be required, we have to think through all this stuff. So let's look at the federal government, for example. The federal government has a very clear policy, and they've indicated they will follow their policy, which is essentially that they will put in 50% of all the total public sector contribution. So depending on what the province and the city put in, the feds will match that. And so these are all kinds of the moving parts we got to figure out. What is critical is for the province to really understand where it's at.